What's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to my Let's Talk F1 2017 series, and this one for the brand new Ferrari 2017 Challenger. Let me know what you guys think of the look of the car, the livery of the car, and just the general aesthetics of the car in the comments below. Looks very, very aggressive from Ferrari. Impressed that they seem to have not gone for a bit of a kind of cautious approach to this year's regulations. They've tried different things, very, very different things from other teams, and it's also nice to see that the pattern has continued on from what we've seen of other cars, of pretty much most cars looking different to one another in terms of what they've gone for aerodynamics-wise, especially around the barge board areas. Obviously, a brand new area opened up this year to the teams via the technical regulations. So a lot of teams have gone for very different ways of approaching that. But let's analyze the car. Let's look through the different detailing. So we're going to start off with the front end here. And first things first, Ferrari now finally got an S-duct on the car. They didn't run one last year. Haven't run one, pretty much, the entire time people have introduced the S-duct into their cars. But now finally Ferrari have gone for an S-duct. And they've sort of gone for a similar inlet style to Mercedes. They've gone for this like very sleek little cut in the underside part of the nose cone, and then you can see the inlet actually is there just at the top, just above where the actual nose meets the part of the bulkhead and the chassis there. So the Ferrari has the S-duct. Obviously, if you don't know what that is, it's basically an S-shaped duct. Obviously, that's why it's named like that, and it basically channels air from the underneath the side of that part of the car to the top of the chassis, smoothens out the flow, and encourages the flow to stay attached on the top of that car. Moving on to the brakes and the underside of the car. The brake inlet itself, the duct, actually, interestingly, has lots of grill-shaped kind of veins on it as well. So I'm not too sure what's going on there. Maybe trying to split the air a little bit. They do have the blown wheel nut, which you'll see in another angle of the car. They've got the blown wheel nut, so that basically means part of the air entering the brake duct will not even touch the brakes. It'll go straight through and through the wheel hubcap, through the wheel nut area, and then that air will get introduced to the freestream air going on the sides of the car, and that will help smoothen the flow on the entire side of the actual side pod of the car. So they've got the blown wheel nut, so perhaps some of the gills in that brake duct are maybe cordoned off and cut off and are going straight into that blown wheel nut. And then got this nice kind of intricate detailing on the actual turning vanes and the winglets they've got on underneath the side of the car. If we then move on to some probably more interesting vanes and winglets, are the top ones. And they've got 3 of them on each side. Very, very interesting detailing, and very, very cool in my opinion in terms of just from an aesthetics point of view, making the car look a bit more like what we had pre-09 sort of thing, where you've got all these different veins coming across. And this is purely from the new technical regulations allowing them to do this. They've got this new box area which they can exploit, and so they've got these 2 main kind of horn-like veins coming off the main chassis, and then a further one back down towards the Ferrari logo. That's pretty much the same area where Mercedes had their winglet, but obviously Ferrari's one is a little bit smaller, a little bit higher up, and it looks like Ferrari are going for a lot of manipulation of the airflow higher up on the top of the side pod and going into the inlet, because you can also see, I haven't circled it out there, but you can clearly see the inlet for the Ferrari car is very, very sleek. They've kind of really tapered it upwards. It's very thin but wider compared to other teams where they've gone for a more kind of, boxy shape to the inlet. So a very aggressive shape to the inlet for Ferrari's car, and we'll see later on in pictures that when we brighten it up, there's actually more going on there that meets the eye from this angle. But it looks like they're trying to manipulate a lot of flow bit further up compared to Mercedes. Mercedes were very much kind of lower down where the barge board was naturally last year, trying to affect that with the huge black winglet they've got, whereas Ferrari, they've got these subtle sort of horn veins coming out on the very top of the chassis, so they're trying to manipulate flow, trying to mix the flow as much as they can to keep it attached as it goes into the inlet, goes on the top of the side pod, and eventually obviously converges down towards the diffuser. If we brighten up this picture, you can see on the right-hand side, they've also got this awesome detailing on the actual brake-covered duct kind of plate they've got on the inside wall. This really nice little winglet on the very bottom, and then this small curving out from the suspension winglet on the very end of that suspension arm. So some nice detailing again from Ferrari, and that's throughout this entire car. It's promising to see that they've actually tried, because in the past we've seen a kind of more cautious approach. We've not seen too much innovation from Ferrari as of late with their car, you know, for the most part compared to other teams. But now, compared to other teams so far, looks like they've tried something very, very different to other cars. You know, we've not seen any teams try a lot of these things so far. So yeah, you know, but obviously through pre-season, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these aerodynamics change. Especially Mercedes have already said that all the aerodynamics are going to change in some way throughout testing. So do not be surprised when maybe other teams copy some of what Ferrari have done. Ferrari copies, you know, something that Mercedes have done. All these teams are going to be trying to get the jump, and we haven't even got to Red Bull yet, who are usually the masters of aerodynamics. So we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting time in preseason testing to see what everyone's actually going to do and how everything's going to change. But we've circled out the blown wheel nut. In the PR photos, they've kind of actually blocked off the blown wheel nut, so you can't see the open cavity, but it's there for sure. Just the very design of the way they've cordoned that off, it definitely suggests the blown wheel nut's still there. But if you look onto the barge board structure, so in terms of the actual main white barge board structure of the Ferrari, it's actually quite simple, sculpted in a way, but they've not gone for any serrated edges like the Mercedes have. But we'll see from an overhead shot, there's more going on behind the barge board than meets the eye from this angle. But you can see moving further to the left-hand side where we've got the Singer Beer sponsors, you've got this kind of double element upright, which also has a third element almost streaking across to meet the kind of actual main chassis. And you can see there's two holes. There's the main inlet, and then you've got this upper hole on the other side. And that's not exactly a actual hole, a physical hole made by the side pod. It's really just a case of they've really shallowed and leaned back the inlet to the side pod, to the radiators and everything like that. But because they've got this upright that goes forwards, it makes it look like there's a second hole there in effect, but really they're just kind of separating the two. They're separating the same hole with that upright, and we'll see from other pictures that they may be trying to cleverly split the air in a way for the intake. Because if we move on to this next shot, brightened it up, you can see there are some very interesting veins and entry points in that inlet, and I think what they're trying to do is split the air quite, you know, dramatically to either go into the radiator duct or meet these veins and get affected by those veins to maybe go somewhere else, or maybe just get affected to take them across the side pod. But definitely some very interesting things going on with this Ferrari car, the way they've done and sculpted that vein that goes across the top of the side pod face. They've got no vortex generators in that side, so they're purely trying to have this concept of affecting this air in this way. So that's what makes me think they're trying something a little bit clever with that. So if we move on to a side shot, first of all, just look at the rake of the car. The rake is very aggressive, a lot like what we've seen from Red Bull and from now Renault. They've introduced it. Now, the rake angle is quite important because it means the front of the car is basically closer to the ground, so you're getting that area of the car working a lot better. And you can just see that on the floor. That's the rake angle, a lot more aggressive, a lot more like what we've seen from Red Bull in the past. But if we move on to the main front part of the car, you can see again circling the veins. You can see what I meant by everything's getting affected on the top edge. You know, for Mercedes, if we compare to Mercedes black wing that they had by the barge board, it would have been around where the bottom of the Ferrari logo was. But Ferrari have worked the top of the car instead. So that's what's making me think they're trying this concept of getting it across to the top of the side pod and into this very interesting split kind of inlet for the side pod, because they're focusing on the high end. But then also at the same time, I did mention a kind of more simplistic white barge board, but they do have that main other secondary barge board almost that's on the side with two little streaks that kind of reminisce the streaks they have on the rear wing. If you just look at it and you flip it the other way, 180, it's almost like the streaks on rear wings that we see from F1 cars now. So they're trying to get the flow manipulated as it goes across, smoothing it out basically with those slot gaps to help it go as it goes across to where the Coke bottle shape is of the side pod. And we talk about that Coke bottle shape, moving on to the rear of the car. We've got some nice squirt slot detailing on the floor of the car, some veins, typical of all F1 cars now these days. But the Coke bottle shape Ferrari, they've tried to get it as lean as possible. They've got quite an undercut actually on the very back end of that side pod. But if you compare it to Mercedes, Ferrari don't look like they've got this same exact tightness, but that also may be due to the radiator setup as well. A big part of that is obviously they can actually fit the radiators for how they wanted to cool it. So that also may be an indication maybe Ferrari haven't been able to package their engine with the cooling as tightly as they've maybe wanted, as maybe Mercedes have gotten away with their car. If we move further up then, you've got the shark fin from the Ferrari car, and you've got this T-wing there. You've got this T-wing on the edge. Now, this is something that Mercedes trialed yesterday. In my video yesterday, as soon as I made the video, they basically went for another secondary run at Silverstone, and they trialed this T-wing that came up from off the actual side, the engine cover. Now Ferrari have got the same exact T-wing, but they've attached it to the shark fin. We've been told Mercedes may just bring their shark fin into testing. They didn't want to launch with it, so Ferrari got this T-wing attached to the shark wing at the end. They've also retained the same black wing they've got just behind the camera housing at the front of the engine cover. Now, typically this black wing was there before. Many teams have used it in the past. Williams have used it in the past. And what they'll do with that wing, when you had the higher rear wing, that black wing at the very front of the engine cover would basically allow air. They would try and bounce the air to the top main plane of the rear wing to create a net upwash of air, and basically effectively then a net downwash, because you're channeling air upwards. That's forcing the pressure to change on the rear wing, and you're getting the downforce via that. Now, with that conjoined with this T-wing, I think what they're trying to do, because if you look at the profile of the T-wing, it's angled downwards. So I think what they're trying to do is get air to kind of bounce towards the main plane, the rear wing. Obviously, it's already being smoothened up by the shark wing. That's what the shark wing's doing. You've got all this turbulent air. It's being smoothened and straightened out by the shark wing, and it's focusing towards that tip edge where you find the new T-wing from the Ferrari, the new T-wing also of the Mercedes car once they launch their shark wing, I'm guessing. But then that T-wing is angled downwards in a way which I feel like suggests they're trying to get air to the main plane to create that net upwash. If we move to an overhead shot, you can clearly see that s-duct now from the Ferrari car, and the really nice detailing that comes from those 3 different top vanes on the actual chassis either side of the driver. Looks very nice, and as I said, aesthetically looks very cool in terms of like a way of like a 08 sort of kind of vibe, where you've got winglets coming off the car like that. But as I mentioned, there's more going on to that barge board area than meets the eye. It looks very simplified with the white, but I think it's kind of deceiving, because when you look at it from top down, you can see it's got a triple element to it. So from the side on, it doesn't look that very interesting, but from the top down, you can see it's actually a triple element sort of barge board structure. And behind the barge boards, just under the wing mirror, you can see in green, I've labeled it, just under the Santander wing mirror, you can see this other black winglet that's kind of hidden away. You can't see it from the side view, but it's yet again another side winglet they've got on that bottom face. Now, it's a bit lower down, so that will be the one affecting flow as it goes past sideways on from the side pod and channels to the side of the car to get to that rear end of the Coke bottle. But then you can see there, I've tried to profile where the actual side pod inlet and the side pod shape is. You can see if we just do a dotted line, it's still a very sort of normal looking shape from the top, but because they've got these 2 uprights that come and cut off, it looks like there's a second hole to the inlet. But that wing, that main upright that goes across the side pod, it's angled backwards in a way where I feel like they're trying to get the air split in 2 different sections to go into the side pod inlet. You've got maybe cooling to the radiator, and then maybe you've got some cooling elsewhere, because they've got those vanes as you saw previously on that lightened picture within the actual inlet. So very, very intriguing way they've gone about it. Very, very interesting. It'll be good to see more close-up photos, hopefully, throughout testing to maybe get better insight into what's actually going on there. And then obviously I've circled the actual T-wing. You can see it's actually quite big in terms of the actual width of the T-wing. It's not really a very tiny, thin structure. It's actually quite large there compared to the rest of the car. But you can see it's literally directly above where the gearbox and sort of the exhaust is housed. So they're trying to get maybe that difference in upwash between, you've got the exhaust gases coming underneath the rear wing, and then you've got this cleaner air from the shark fin, from the T-wing going to the top of the rear wing. And so that difference is going to create a pressure change in the rear wing and create downforce. If we move on to some different kind of angles of the car during a Ferrari video, promotional video, you can see some more detailing on the inside of the upright there in black and carbon fiber. You've got those 2 winglets coming off, so again, hidden detail. But then if you look to the left, this sidepod inlet just gets more and more interesting. So I mentioned the upright is basically creating like a fake hole almost, with the kind of double upright extending over the sidepod. But then from this angle, it does look like there's actually a bit of a weird kink to the inlet, and they've also drooped it down, and the upright is merging into the bodywork, like, very ferociously, and kind of forms into part of the inlet floor on the bottom there. Very, very peculiar way they've designed that, and it's going to be interesting to see if it works out for them, and exactly if there's going to be any more developments there. I suspect they may be trying more winglets in that area throughout testing, perhaps, to really try and exploit that area of the car. But Ferrari, very, very nice to see they've gone for an aggressive kind of strategy with their car this year. You know, they haven't really gone cautiously, and they're trying different things. May not work out, may work out. We'll see. We're yet to see. But it's going to be a very interesting development week for Ferrari during testing. But that's been the Ferrari car. Let me know what you think of the look of the car, general, you know, aerodynamics, just the general concept they've gone with. Let me know in the comments below. And you're doing, do subscribe for weekly Formula 1 content. If you have enjoyed the video, leave a like button. But that's been the kind of main interesting part of the Ferrari car. Obviously, there are other features of the Ferrari car which are pretty much there on every F1 car, like the streaks on the rear wing, on the upwash streaks, and things like that. But I've kind of pinpointed just the kind of main Ferrari-specific detailing. But yeah, looking like a promising challenger here from Ferrari. We yet to see really if all these aerodynamics are going to work out. Hopefully their numbers are correct in the wind tunnel, but we're yet to see. And also a big factor is still the engine. You know, it's been noted the Mercedes engine has been improved in every single possible area. So really, Ferrari, you know, we've got to hope that Ferrari's engine is also improved for the sake of them and their performance. But that's been the Ferrari car. Again, if you did enjoy the video, hit that like button. Let me know what you thought. Subscribe when you're around here. Hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you guys next time.